Well, I'm here today with Graham Holliday, and some of you will know Graham because he's been our moderator. Those of you that don't know what a moderator is or what Graham's role has been, just about 2 years ago, our minister left, and a short time after, our assistant minister left. And so Graham was involved in helping us find a new minister to come and be with us, and that's James, and James is now with us. But it's great to have an opportunity to speak with Graham today. Graham, it's good to be here.
It's good to be with you, Paul. Thank you so much for coming to our house. We really appreciate it. And it's great to have the opportunity to sort of put the other side of my life, really, other than the upfront side of helping leaders and steering churches. So it's great. Good to have the opportunity to be part of this online ministry.
So Graham, we've seen a lot of you. You've done a lot of talks. You've really helped us in this COVID-19 period, as well as actually before that. But probably we've not had the opportunity to talk to you and get to know you. So that's partly what we want to do today. So perhaps just to start, just tell us a little bit about yourself and your early life.
Well, I was born in London, but after a few years, my parents moved out of London into Essex. And we lived in a place called Rochford, and a small suburb outside Rochford was Hawkwell, but it was really in the Thames Estuary area, so people would know about Southend-on-Sea. And so I grew up there, and the interesting thing is that when I left school, I worked for British Telecom. I can tell you that it wasn't British Telecom in those days, it was GPO telephones and then post office telephones before it became BT. I trained and qualified, and I was a planning engineer. Now, a planning engineer in British Telecom was either external planning, which was cables and outside line plant. I was internal planning, which was to design and provide the telephone equipment that went into our telephone exchanges to enable people to communicate with one another. After about 10 years, I felt I was going to be working for the church. And so as a consequence of that, I trained for the Baptist ministry. And well, there's a lot that's happened since then. But I've had pastorates, I've got married, I've had children, but that's really the sort of early part of life.
So I just wonder, Graham, you've led your own churches, you've been serving us as a moderator, which I know you've done for other churches, but perhaps going back a bit further, and just if you can, just explain what your journey into faith was actually like for you.
Yes. Well, I said that I lived in Hawkwell, and at the Baptist church, instead of having boys' brigade, which a lot of Baptist churches have, they had the Scouts. They later had boys' brigade, but it was a Scouts group that was based at the church. And I joined the Scouts, and my particular Scout leader attended the Baptist church for its own sake, not just as a place to be where the Scouts were. And he talked about a young people's fellowship, a group of people for young people, and encouraged me to go. And it also happened that one of my patrol leader of the troop, he actually was a tending member of this YPF. So it was a pincer movement attack on me from a patrol leader and the scout leader, and I went along to the Young People's Fellowship. And it was while I was in the Young People's Fellowship that I gave my life to Jesus Christ and was baptised in that church, and then started to just work as a youth leader within the life of the church. I became a lay pastor for a small little church down the road that came under the auspices of our church, and it just seemed as if my life was evolving. into being some kind of ministry, and after 10 years of having an ordinary career, I was married by then to my lovely wife Christine, and I went to Spurgeon's College to train for the ministry.
So I've said it many times in this interview about the way you've served us as moderator, and I know actually, because I've spent a lot of time with you as part of the leadership team, I know how much time that takes. Probably doesn't leave you with a lot of other time, but when you do have free time, I just wonder what sort of things you enjoy doing.
That's a good question, really, because it has, as you say, been a life of ministry and service, but I'm a sailor, and I love dinghy sailing, and wherever we've been I've tried to find a place, usually inland places, but when we came down here I joined the Swanage Sailing Club, and I have a sailing dinghy there, and I really enjoy that. I've always been interested in boating and water sports, and I used to have a powerboat a while ago, but when I got into sailing I found it very, very therapeutic, seeking the wind, and it's relaxing, and so I've really enjoyed going down to Swanage, into the Bay area and Old Harry Rocks, and just sailing with my dinghy and having a few people down there. They're in a position to sort of either come with me. So it's been that. The other thing, I've always had an interest in steam trains, and I guess in a strange sort of way, when we've been on holiday we've often found a place if they've got a heritage railway, and I've gone along to it, both here and abroad. So when it came to moving down here and being a stone's throw from the Swanage Heritage Railway, I discovered that most of the railway is run by volunteers. Obviously there are paid people, but a lot of volunteers, and I thought I'd like to be involved in that as a volunteer, perhaps one day a week, and so I did. And I'll tell you a story about this, because I had thought I would go along and be a porter or a ticket collector or someone riding the train. I'm a bit old in the tooth to learn to be a driver at this stage. But as it turned out, the recruiting officer at the railway said, what did you used to do? And I said, well, I've been a Baptist minister for 35 years. And he said, so it's to work with people then, really? And I thought, I should be on that train any minute now as a ticket collector or a porter, maybe a guard. He said, what did you do before you went into the Baptist ministry? I said, well, I was a telecom engineer for 10 years. And with that, he got up, he leaned out of the window, called a man in and said, there's a man here who knows about the old equipment. And the next thing was, I was told, we'd like to have you on signalling and telecom. There's 3 small telephone exchanges on the on the track in 3 separate stations. And so I ended up doing that once a week, but I have had the chance to go on the footplate and go up and down on the train. So sailing and the railway, and walking with Christine.
So when I do these interviews, there's always something that's going to happen. Today we've got a chainsaw. I'm not sure whether the tape is picking that up, but it started raining, so we're just going to take a short pause. We're going to grab some umbrellas and then we'll carry on. Back in a minute.
Great, thank you.
So there we are, Graham. We've managed to just slide ourselves across under the brolly. At least half of you is dry now, and the same here. So Graham, those are the things you enjoy doing in your spare time. It sounds actually great. I'd love to do both of those things, so maybe join you at some point. But I just wonder, with everything that we've been going through, here we are socially distancing, we still live in strange times. And I just wondered if you could just sort of say how the whole COVID-19 thing has affected you.
Sure. I think it's been similar for us as it's been for a lot of people. A measure of anxiety as to what it would mean if we got COVID. The things that we took for granted relationally suddenly changed, and that was quite difficult. On the positive side, I'm glad in a way that I'd retired when we got it. I feel very much for people who've been in work and have had to find different ways to react and respond to being in a different situation. I feel for those perhaps whose job has been lost as a result of it, and others that are finding new ways of maintaining a living. So we've been very much involved in prayer for people that we've known and for others as well. And like others, we've been able to work at home. The garden has never been quite so well attended, nor the jobs around the house. But in all honesty, we'd missed seeing the family regularly because we've needed to be in our own bubble. But that means that I'm glad I've gone through it with a faith and sensed that I can pray about it each day. And I'm glad I've gone through it with Christine because sharing it together, and that has made us feel for people who've been on their own. So it's been a strange thing. I do believe that this is not how we're meant to live, but I can quite understand that we can learn from it and live differently because of it. But I believe as Christians, I believe we're born into relationship when we become Christians, and so we're praying that it won't be too long before that will be much more easier to live that out.
So Graham, just to finish today, as we always do with these, perhaps there's a piece of scripture you'd like to just share with us, yes. And tell us why you've chosen the one you've chosen.
Okay. Well, Paul, having been in ministry for all these years and taught and preached on so many verses of the Bible, I knew that you'd asked me to come up with a verse, and I felt perhaps I should share the verse that I used when I was ordained. Prior to my ordination, there was a leaving student service at Moorlands, and you are asked to submit a Bible verse that you think would be specific for your ministry. So when it came to me, I selected John's Gospel, chapter 1, verse 14. I'll just read it to you. The Word, which in fact is Jesus, became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. And it just occurred to me at the time, if I'm entering into the ministry, it's not my ministry, it's actually a ministry of Jesus Christ. And I suppose that phrase, Jesus, full of grace and truth, just hit me quite hard, that I'd like a ministry that was also full of grace and full of truth. In the idea of not just truth in a legalistic way, but a truth that expressed the heart of God for people. But grace on its own would have no rudder. It can be just sentimental things. and I wanted grace to be underpinned with his truth. And so all I can say is probably not very well, but it was just something like, I'd like to have a ministry and a life that was characterised by some of the qualities that were full in him: grace and truth. You'll have to ask others if it's been true.
Well, as someone that has, even during lockdown, had the privilege of being able to Zoom with you regularly, you've been supporting me in those early months, which I very much appreciated. And I think I can say with all honesty that that you most definitely have shown a great deal of grace towards me, and supported me with wisdom and God's truth. So there's a thank you from me, and I'm sure many others would say the same. So thank you for your time today, Graham.
My pleasure. Bless you, Paul.